Hi everyone, please vote Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Deftones album, Ohms! This is the newest full-length LP from legendary Sacramento alt-metal outfit Deftones. Ohms makes for their 9th full-length LP, and it comes 4 years after the painfully forgettable Gore in 2016. However, the more I listen to some parts of this new record, I kind of wish I could go back. Which is more than disappointing because it's not like I went into this record with the highest expectations in the world. Personally, I have been mostly agnostic toward everything the band has put out in the 2010s, despite Koino Yokon being a major fan favorite at this point. Look, I just prefer the menacing riffs and songwriting of Around the Fur or the savage bliss of White Pony. Then there's also the experimental and controversial Saturday Night Wrist, which is one of the most texturally exciting records the band has done thus far. For me, it was somewhat of a shock to go from that to the very heavy and bland Diamond Eyes just a few years later. And I know that's more of a Fantano opinion than a Deftones fan opinion because that is pretty much a beloved album in the band's canon. Though, again, I'm not sure why that album for me is so sonically basic. There's so little in the way of nuance laced into its artificially pumped up drums and guitars. Part of what made Deftones such an exciting metal band in the 90s and 2000s is that they were more nuanced and dynamic than many of their contemporaries. And while Ohms does certainly have a subtler presentation, to me this was another weak batch of songs, and there are some head-scratching sounds all over this record too. The opener, Genesis, features this loud but totally unimpressive two-note riffing, which is wrapped in these faux, eerie, sci-fi synthesizers that sound like they're straight out of the soundtrack to a terrible 80s movie. Now pay attention to these synths because this is not the only point on the record where they appear. For some reason, the band seems to recycle them over and over and over like there's some bad sonic gimmick that's going out of style. Vocally, Chino's just screaming his brains out in this mix with a very abrasive chorus effect on his voice too, delivering lyrics about rejecting both sides of what you're being told and like achieving balance as a result of that. I know Deftones lyrics tend to run a little esoteric or cryptic, but what is being delivered here? Is it some true centrist wet dream where the socially agnostic rise up through the ashes of our partisan society once it burns down completely to parade their unwillingness to engage with complex issues? But honestly, whatever is happening with the lyrics here, it doesn't bother me nearly as much as these grating guitars, grating vocals, and these horrendous, indulgent synth experiments that get less and less complementary to the instrumental as it drags on. By comparison, Ceremony is slightly more tuneful, even if the vocal harmonies on the hook sound slightly out of tune. There is a better song structure on this track, a better mix, but I can't shake the feeling that this is what you would get if you held Billy Corrigan at gunpoint and forced him to write a really mediocre Deftones song. With a glistening atmosphere, ringing guitars, and a brooding bass line, Urantia on the surface sounds a lot more like it, but if you took the Billy Corrigan gun and you pointed it at me, I probably couldn't sing you a single bar from this track. The vocal melodies on this one are just that typical for Deftones. Not to mention the final leg of this track is so tedious it's like being stuck behind a school bus in rush hour traffic. Then we have Error, which I guess lives up to its title, because the drums sound terrible and there are these hot, sour shots of guitar that like spray into my ears as if they're acid. It's like the sonic equivalent of taking an extension cord, sawing through it, plugging it in, and sucking on the exposed wiring. Somehow the incorporation of chunkier riffs and a psychedelic bridge don't make the song any more appealing. Plus, let me remind you that we're 4 tracks into this record so far, and Chino is yet to come up with one single infectious vocal line. Mix-wise, there is more room to breathe on the Spell of Mathematics, but the stench is so bad I'm trying not to inhale. Chino's listless moaning on this track comes off as totally directionless, even when he's digging into his upper register and getting super angsty. The instrumental consists of these very ghostly, ill-defined layers of droning guitars, vocal harmonies, and more sci-fi synths. It's like eating a lasagna, but the filling is melted Halloween candy. Then things switch up for the better on the following track, where we actually have a tuneful vocal and some sensible lyrics. There's a tastefully dynamic sonic shift from the skeletal, very moody, subdued verses to the crushing riffs on the hook too. Sure, the track sounds like it could be a little bit like a Around the Fur B-side or something, but at this point I will take it. Link is Dead, miraculously, is also one of the most coherent and groovin' songs on the record. It's like as soon as we transition into the second half of the record, Chino really starts to get his shit together vocally. The band is sounding a lot tighter. The songs are actually memorable. It's not the most amazingly produced Deftones song ever, but I think the band uses the rawness of the mix and kind of the distortion of it as well to their advantage to just sound really aggressive like on their early shit. Radiant City, I guess, is an improvement on the first half as well, even if I think some of those speedy guitar riffs are a little awkward. Those droning synthesizers quietly wailing away in the background, they're still there, still popping up, adding nothing to the record though, but the band insists on shoving them down our throats. Meanwhile, the track Headless tries to play things sinister, but mostly comes off safe just because of how typical and predictable the song is for Deftones. However, again, I can't complain too much given just how aggravating the first half of the LP was, especially since the final leg of the song is genuinely serene and blissful. Then there's the title track that I mentioned earlier that is also the closer of the record. I loved it as a single and I still love it on the album. I guess it's my favorite track. It's just unfortunate that my favorite song comes at the very end and I enjoy it so much more than everything else on the record. Plus, even though it's my favorite track, I mean, the band's approach here seems pretty obvious songwriting-wise. There's not a whole lot here in terms of evolution or surprise. You could say it's a typical Deftones number, but then the guitars have this speedy sludge metal quality to them that's maybe slightly progressive. It's like they got some dude from Baroness to come in and just lay down some guitar lines for it. Look, I did not enjoy this record. I didn't, and I am pretty split on the track list. Like, there are a lot of great moments that turn up on the second half of this thing, but God, the first 5 tracks are a punishment. Yeah, I'm feeling a strong 3 to a light 4 on this one. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like, please subscribe, and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Deftones, forever.